So there are multiple ways to secure our webhook endpoints, and I want to show you a really secure way that's also one of the most straightforward ways, and that is using a predefined list of IP addresses that Stripe gives us. Okay, let's jump in and have a look. So head over to docs.stripe.com, and what you want to search for is domains and IP addresses. So if I copy that and paste it into the search bar, it should come up first. Domains and IP addresses. So the subtitle says, ensure your integration is always communicating with Stripe. And that's exactly what we need to do, because we needed to make our endpoints public so Stripe could communicate with our app. But it does mean that someone using an external program like Postman can actually send data to our backend and populate our database with data. Okay, so we just need to secure that, and in terms of Stripe security, I feel like IP addresses is a good middle ground between being really secure and also quite straightforward to implement. So if we scroll down on this page, if we head to the bottom, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 12 IP addresses. So webhook notifications, that's exactly how we are communicating with Stripe. The full list of IP addresses that webhook notifications may come from. So every time Stripe sends an event webhook to our Bubble app, in the header section will be an IP address. And all we need to do is match that IP address to this list. So we're going to save this list of IP addresses to our option set, and then we're just going to do a little piece of matching logic. Okay, so I want you to copy the first one, and we're going to have to come back and do all 12 of these. I'm going to show you the process, and then I'm going to let you get on with doing this yourself. But let's copy the first one, 318.12.63. I'm going to jump back into Bubble, and I'm going to go to Data and then Option Sets. I'm going to create a new option set called Stripe. And now I'm going to create an option called Allowed IPs. Like so. And now I'm going to create a new attribute. This one will be called IPs. This is going to be a list of text. Okay, so checklist, multiple entries, because we've got 12 to implement here. And actually, let's just change allowed IPs just to allowed, like so. Now I'd like you to modify attributes and simply paste in the first IP address and add. Let's go back to Stripe, go to the next row. We need to do it for all of these, okay? Copy, back to Bubble, and paste. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward the section. I'm going to get all of my IP addresses in. Please do the same. They all need to be in because Stripe will send these from just a random IP from this list, okay? Okay guys, so hopefully you got all of those in without a hitch. Now let's look at how we can implement this logic in our backend endpoints. So let's head over to the backend workflows, please. And remember when we first created this backend workflow, or this endpoint I should say, remember when I asked you to include headers in detect data, check. That is where one of these IP addresses from the list is going to come down. And that's where we can access it to build this matching logic. Let's first see if we can identify this IP address. I'm going to click on Modify Types. I'm going to just quickly scroll right to the bottom. Let's actually show raw data. This will be easier to read. Okay, so here we have the headers. So we check that box and now all of this data comes down. Second in the list, CF connecting IP. Here we have an IP address, 52.15.183.38. Okay, so ends in 183.38. Now, your IP address will be different, or it might be the same. You have a 1 in 12 chance, but it might be different. So don't worry if it doesn't match mine. Let's just make sure that this IP address is in the list of IP addresses that we copied across. So mine ends in 183.38, yours might be different. So 183.38. Here you go, 183.38, middle of the list for me. 52, 50, 15, 183.38. Perfect. So this is how we do it. I'm going to click on this API workflow event, and I'm going to go to the only when. Let me bring this up here. I'm going to grab the option set we've just created, get an option, Stripe, allowed, then close, and then I'm going to choose IPs. Okay, so now that's pointing to the list. So here we have a list of IP addresses. Then I'm going to say contains, and then I'm going to try get to that header IP address. Request data. When you type the word head, that brings up the headers. And here we have the CF connecting IP. And that's it. So allowed IPs is a list of texts, and connecting IP is a text. I know it's a bunch of numbers, but there are dots in between as well, so it's a text. And that's it, guys. We're now secured. You don't need to worry about things like IP spoofing. Some people have questioned me in the past about IP spoofing. Yes, that's a thing. Stripe is a multi-billion-dollar company that deals with banks. Okay, they have security in place to mitigate all of these problems, and they are offering a list of IP addresses which they wouldn't offer if it wasn't secure. So it is secure. Let's do it to this one now. Subscription updated. On my break, I actually updated just the title of this instead of subscription updates to subscription updated. Okay. So all I'm going to do is copy this expression, go to the next block, paste expression, and we're done. And if you aren't receiving your webhooks, if they're not being delivered to Bubble, this is probably the reason. You might have made a mistake, or you might have left out one of those 12 IP addresses in the option set. All right, guys, so we've secured that process now. These two endpoints are secure, and from here on, whenever we create this backend endpoint, we're going to be using this matching logic to make sure that the endpoint is secure. Now we're going to deal with deleting a subscription. And what I mean by that is at the end of the billing cycle, that subscription now comes to an end. So we've dealt with the cancellation process, but now obviously 30 days after that workflow is run, then Stripe actually needs to decommission that subscription in Stripe, which means that user won't be charged anymore. Okay, so we now need to change some data in Bubble to reflect that has happened on Stripe. Okay, so we're going to deal with basically another endpoint that we're going to create. We're going to go detect request data and go through the same process of setting up the other two. So let's jump in. So this is the workflow for deleting a subscription. At the end of the billing period, Stripe is going to send us this event, customer subscription deleted. And that's when it's time for us to change a subscription where the field active, which is currently yes, now will change to no. So let's jump into Bubble and set up this backend endpoint. Okay, so we're in the backend workflows. We're going to create a new backend workflow. This one will be called subscription deleted. We're going to check all three boxes. We're going to set this to detect request data, and remember we need to include the headers. Let's change up the colors here. So this is a deletion webhook. I'm going to make this red. And the one to the left is subscription updated. Why don't we change this to blue? So we've got cyan, blue, and red. And what I normally do is just put this in brackets, just so it's more legible. Now, when we were in our API connector, we created the cancellation API workflow so that the user Lucy can then cancel their subscription when they would like to. When we initialize the call, we actually made the call to Stripe, and we'll notice in our Stripe dashboard that Lucy's subscription is set to cancel. Okay, so that the wheels are in motion, and we're going to actually force that subscription to cancel straight away to initialize this endpoint. But let me show you in the Stripe dashboard what I mean. Okay, so if I go down to subscriptions, here I can see here is Lucy's email, and it says canceling on the 28th of July. But what we can actually do is choose to cancel the subscription immediately. So we're going to use this action to basically create the custom subscription deleted event to send to Bubble to initialize our endpoint. Okay, so let's jump back into Bubble and click on detect data for your subscription deleted endpoint. And click on the E for initialize, so it copies all of it. And now let's go into Stripe and set up this endpoint. I'm going to click on developers, head down to webhooks. I'm going to create a new endpoint. And I'm going to scroll down to customer. And I'm going to look for customer subscription deleted. Here we go here. Occurs whenever a customer subscription ends. Check that box and then continue. I'm going to paste in the initialization webhook. Remember, afterwards we need to delete initialize. And let's just type a message here. When a user's subscription is cancelled at the end of the billing period. Okay, let's create that destination. And let me find it on the left-hand side. Here we go here. Perfect. Okay, so there is no way for Lucy to actually delete her subscription straight away. It's currently set to cancel at the end of the billing period. So let's just jump in and manually do this. All right, I'm going to minimize my workbench, and you want to head into subscriptions, find Lucy's subscription and click on the X, and we're going to do this immediately. Okay, cancel. There you go, that's been cancelled. Now, let's head back to Bubble and look at our endpoint. Here we go. And this is a pretty simple one. All we need is the body object ID, which is the subscription. That's all we need. So I'm going to save that. Okay, now that it's been initialized, before we go any further, let's just go back to Stripe and remove initialize from the webhook URL. Developers, webhooks, and here it is here with initialize. Now that's been done. So I'm going to edit and remove everything, including the / and then save. Okay, so this process, we still need to do it a few more times, but this is the process, and by the end of this course, you'll be so used to it. All right, so now we can build our workflow. The first thing I'm going to do is secure this endpoint by copying this logic. Copy expression and paste expression. If it turns blue, you know that everything is good to go. So what do we want to do here? Let's just look at the data. So in data types, when a subscription is active, we have this yes, no field. So basically all we need to do is change active from yes to no. So first we need to find the subscription to make a change to. So make changes to thing. And let's do a search for subscriptions. And let's say the first item. And now we just need to match the ID because the ID is brought down via the webhook. And it's request datas. body object ID. Simple as that. Remember? Let me click back here and just show you modify types. Body object ID starts with a sub underscore. That means it's a subscription ID. So we found the subscription. Now let's just change from active yes to active no. And guys, that's all we need to do. Now, there are multiple additions you can implement here. Obviously, if they're subscribed to your SaaS software, well, then you need to build logic to make sure that they can't access, the subscribe portion of the software. You can send them an email to let them know that it's been cancelled. You can send yourself an email. You can let Stripe deal with that if you'd like, and we're going to have a look at that. But for now, that's it. So that is initialized after a user hits cancel. It will cancel at the end of the billing period. Then this event will be fired to Bubble and it will downgrade via the webhooks. Nice and neat. So I think that's it for deleting a subscription, and we'll move on to the next section. Now we have a data type called payments, and we have a data type called subscriptions. And every month, a payment towards a subscription will be made, or to keep the subscription active. We need to record every time a payment is made in our Bubble app. And we also need to manage a process called dunning, which is communication with a customer to let them know that their card has failed, the payment has failed for another reason, bank declined the transaction, and so forth. And now what we're going to look at is another endpoint, while we're on the topics of endpoints, to be able to track when an invoice is successfully paid, but then also leverage some Stripe logic, because I think they do this really well, to be able to manage failed payments. But let's first deal with the successful payment in Bubble. So when the subscription is first created, we have an endpoint in Bubble that creates a subscription and also creates a payment. So that is basically how we set up the subscription. And from next month, basically Stripe will charge the card automatically. Okay, it's a SaaS product, it's a recurring subscription. Now we do need to create data in the Bubble database for whenever a payment is made. So for that, we're going to use Invoice paid. Okay, so we need to create another endpoint in Stripe and go through this process again. There's something I first want to show you in the backend workflows though. So here is our checkout session endpoint, and a payment is made to set up the subscription. So we create the subscription when a successful payment has been made on the Stripe hosted checkout page. And then after that, we create a new payment. Okay, now did you notice that we have a field called billing reason? And the billing reason is subscription create, because now we have another endpoint we need to create for recurring payments. This is the payment for setting up the subscription. What about next month and the month after? And for that, we have another billing reason, and that is a subscription cycle, basically. So we need another endpoint to be able to deal with this. We can't use this endpoint because this is the endpoint for setting up the subscription initially. So we're going to create another one, guys, another API workflow here. We're going to call this Invoice paid. Okay, just going to put brackets around this. Here we go. Let's make this green. Green for the color of money. We're getting paid, guys. This is great. Business is booming. Make sure to check all of these. Remember, we're using IP addresses down here, some logic to secure this endpoint. Okay, and of course, we're going to detect, request data, and include headers. So we've just been through the subscription deleted webhook initialization. While it's fresh in our minds, let's do the same now for invoice paid. So I'm going to detect data, and I'm going to copy this endpoint. Then I'm going to pop into Stripe. Head over to developers, webhooks. I'm here already in Stripe Workbench. I'm going to create a new endpoint. I'm going to filter by typing invoice, and I'm looking for invoice.paid, okay? Now there are other ways to do this. Some of you that are quite proficient with Stripe might say, oh Greg, why aren't we using this particular event? And many events share similar data. This is the way I do it. This is the way I think that's the cleanest, and it gets the job done. So invoice.paid occurs whenever an invoice payment attempt succeeds or an invoice is marked as paid out of band, so paid a different way. So let's click on invoice.paid and continue. Paste in that endpoint. The bubble one, make sure initialized is spelled correctly. When a successful payment is made. I'm going to create that destination. Okay, and I'm just checking. Yep, this looks good. So in order to initialize this, we're actually going to sign up as a new person because we've lost Lucy as a customer. She didn't like the software. She decided to cancel, and then she asked us, guys, just cancel immediately. I'm not interested. So we did that. And that's how we initialized our subscription deletion endpoint. So to initialize the invoice paid, we're basically going to sign up a new person and have them sign up to a new subscription. So let's do that. So let's go back to Bubble. I want you to keep this tab open though, guys. Let's go back to Bubble. I'm going to cancel this for a moment. And what I'd like to do is head over to Test and then preview the page. All right, we're going to log out. Perfect. Now we're going to go back to the auth page. And let's sign up as a new user. Okay, let's just sign up as someone. Let's call this person Nathan Wright. Email address, you know what to do here, guys. Make sure to include Nathan in this email address so it's easier to track and actually use what we're building here properly. Let's sign up. Fantastic. I'm going to do the starter plan. Please do the same. We are going to get around to upgrades and downgrades later on in the course. Okay, so just stop here a second because remember we're trying to initialize a webhook endpoint. So after a successful subscription is made, Stripe is going to send the event back to Bubble. We need to be ready to capture that event to initialize the call. So before we go any further, let's go back to Bubble, head over to your backend workflows, click on invoice paid, and then detect data. Okay. Let's now make this payment. So I've got my Stripe test card information saved into Chrome. Please type in Nathan's full name as a card holder name here. Otherwise it will show up incorrectly in the Stripe dashboard. All right, folks, let's go ahead. Your subscription was successful. You can manage your plan from your account page. Beautiful. Now I'm going to go to account. And here we go. Started and renews. And here we go, guys. Here is my invoice that I can download. Let's check out the backend detect data. Okay, this has all come through. And one thing I want to point you to is the billing reason. So we've got subscription create here. okay, because this is the first time a payment was made. Next month, the billing reason will be subscription cycle. Let's save this. And now we need to create a new thing. We're going to create a payment. I'm going to add all fields here. Let's work top to bottom. So we've done this before. We're going to start with request data here for these ones. Going to filter by typing amount and amount paid. That comes down as cents, so we need to divide by 100. Done. Charge ID. So the billing reason, we're just going to type this out. Subscription _ cycle. All lowercase, spelled correctly, or it won't work. So the charge, request data, body object charge, customer, request data, body object customer, invoice is basically the body object's ID. Now we have to find the plan. What plan was this for? So we go get all plans first in Bubble. Okay, grab all the plans. Here's a plan, all options, close that. Now let's set up some filtering to make sure that we're getting the correct plan. Now the plan is a little bit buried here. Let me actually show you first. If I modify types, I'm going to scroll right to the bottom. You don't need to do this. You can just look at what I'm doing. Here it is here. Okay, so I thought this was the end. So it's under lines here, okay? And lines is basically a list. What we're looking for is a plan ID. Here's the plan, here's the ID, here's the price. So that's what we're trying to get to, okay? So let's do this. Let's click back on filtered. Let's first set up the path to what I've just showed you. So request data. I'm going to type in lines. So object lines here. It's a list, so I'm going to choose the first item and then plan ID. Here it is here. Okay, now that needs to match to our option set. So I'm going to say is this plan's ID price test. Because the ID price test for starter is this. Ends in ODH. Yeah, ODH. That is a match. Okay, and because it's a list of plans, I'm going to choose the first option. So the subscription, we're going to do a search for subscriptions and then match the IDs, because we need to track for which subscription is this payment made for, okay? So there's the ID of the subscription, that needs to equal request data, body object subscription. And that's an ID that's returned. The first item that is returned, this will only be one. And lastly, the user. And I'm going to use the customer email for this. Here it is here, customer email. Clear that, we need to do a search for and then match. Do a search for users, where the email equals request datas customer email, and then close. first item, please, because it's a list of users. Okay, so there's one small little puzzle now we need to figure out, because the endpoint we've just initialized, the invoice.paid, I only want to collect this particular payment where the billing reason is subscription cycle. I only want to capture this next month. I don't want to create it the first time because the billing reason for the first time is subscription create. So we need a bit of conditional logic here to make sure that this is only created, this is created according to the correct payment, not the setting up of the subscription, but the recurring payment. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say only create this payment when the billing reason is subscription cycle. So when the request date is, there we go. I typed in reason and I got billing reason. When it is, and then I'm going to type with my keyboard, subscription_cycle, all lowercase. Only when this equals true, then create this payment. Because if we go back to the checkout session, well, we have this payment as well. Now, when we initialized this webhook, it was for a different reason. It was for a checkout session, not an invoice.paid. So we have to get to the invoice via a different route. So what we'll do is this. We'll say, get data from an external API. We're going to retrieve the invoice and do it this way. We have the invoice that is sent down through the checkout session endpoint. Webhook. Its request date is invoice. Now that we're at the invoice, we have a billing reason. There it is there, billing reason. When that is subscription_create, all lowercase. Okay, so that's the only time this particular payment is made. So that is the slight quirk. Stripe gives us so much information to work with, so it's really up to us to architect the logic and bubble how we see fit, okay? So with that done, the last thing we can do here is on invoice paid, we can copy across the matching logic for the IP addresses. So we're just going to go to checkout session, copy expression, paste expression. All right, guys, fantastic. We're doing really, really well. So we have a checkout session for when a subscription is first created. We have an invoice paid. This one deals with recurring payments. We're tracking that in Bubble. That gives us lots of flexibility to communicate back to a customer and to track revenue coming into our SaaS product. We have a subscription deleted, which takes care of the end of a billing cycle after the cancel workflow has started. And we have a subscription updated. And over here, we are tracking when a person first runs the cancel workflow. We're making sure that we're communicating back to a user that their subscription will be downgraded at the end of the billing period. So one more thing we need to do is jump back into Stripe, remove the initialize from the Stripe webhook. Okay, make sure you've chosen the latest one, which is invoice paid, initialize, edit that, and from the D onwards, backspace, and then save. So it needs to end on invoice paid. Part of running a successful SaaS business is the ability to reduce churn, which is the ability to keep users subscribed for as long as possible. And a key component of this is called dunning. And dunning refers to the process of communicating with customers to collect overdue payments on failed subscription renewals. And this involves a series of automated reminders, actions such as sending email notifications, retrying payment methods, and potentially suspending or cancelling the service if the payment is not resolved. So in essence, dunning aims to reduce churn and recover lost revenue. Let's look at the built-in tools that Stripe offers us to help handle this process. I'm currently in my Stripe dashboard, and let's have a look at what tools we have at our disposal. So I'm going to go across to settings and then billing. And along the top, we have some sub-menu options. One of them is subscriptions and emails. Let's have a look. And in the first section, we have free trial messaging. Now, we didn't implement a trial, but if we did, we have the option to, for instance, send a reminder that in 7 days the free trial ends, etc. I want to talk about dunning specifically. We have a way to prevent failed payments, such as sending customers emails about up and coming renewals, and also send emails about expiring cards. So you can see that there are a lot of reasons why payments can fail. Not just that a user doesn't want to subscribe to the software, but maybe they don't know that their card is about to expire before the next billing cycle, and so forth. Maybe they don't have enough money in that particular account. There's so many reasons for this. So we can mitigate these problems by utilizing Stripe's built-in dunning tools here. And I would suggest that you do use Stripe's tools. The emails that Stripe sends, you can preview these emails. And basically, we haven't set up any branding, but if you go to the bottom here, you can see that we have customized design and also send it from our own domain. What about failed payments for subscriptions? Okay, so we've covered up and coming renewals and expiring cards. Stripe will send your customers an email. You don't have to do anything. You can just focus on your business while Stripe handles this for us. So in terms of card payments, use the smart retry policy for subscriptions. And if I hover over this icon, it says retry failed payments at the optimal times, powered by Stripe's machine learning. Now this is interesting because what they're essentially saying is Stripe has to charge a user's bank, and there are thousands of banks around the world, okay? All of these banks have different policies. These banks don't care if payments are being requested by Stripe. You know, they have their own policies in place to prevent fraud. Sometimes banks will decline recurring payments if it's a UK bank trying to charge or extract money from a US bank or Brazilian bank. These things just happen. Stripe, through machine learning, have found out really smart ways to know when to retry a payment and to basically work with these particular banks around when is the best time or the highest possibility of a payment being successful and when is the worst time to try take payment from a card. So again, this is why we're using Stripe's tools, right? They have a lot of R&D behind their product and they know about the global banking system. So in this option, we have that if a card payment fails, Stripe will automatically try to recharge the card up to 8 times within a 2-week period. Okay, for each time that this card payment fails, we can send the user an email to let them know. We can also build our own custom policy here. We've got ACH payment retries. And this is quite important, this next section. It says subscription status. If all of these 8, I can change this to 4, and actually most of the time I use 4 within a month. If all of these retry payments fail, what do we do? What do we do? And I'd suggest at that point, then you cancel the subscription. When you cancel the subscription, we know what's going to happen. Stripe is going to send Bubble a webhook. We're going to catch that webhook through subscription deleted, and then we're going to downgrade their subscription within our Bubble app. And then also, what do we do in terms of the invoice status? Do we leave it overdue or do we mark it as uncollectible? I would say mark it as uncollectible and have a user resubscribe to a new plan. Okay, there's some other options down here. I'll let you have a look at those. And there's some options down here about manual invoicing as well. But basically that is how we deal with dunning. Now Stripe have also rolled out what's called automations. This is a brand new feature. And it says automate subscription and invoice workflows. Use automations to create dunning flows, notify your team when invoices become overdue, etc. So we already have that up and running, but you can get more granular with how you'd like this to work. Let's just try set one up. So click on Get Started. This one will be called Dunning. And the trigger to kick off this workflow is when the subscription payment fails. Okay, you could also do an invoices overdue, but I'm going to choose subscription fails, payment fails. All right, we have more conditions, so we can get more granular with the first option I showed you, which is basically we're toggling something on or off. Now we're getting more granular and applying multiple conditions to build our flow. I'm going to leave this one. I don't want this one, so I'm going to click Continue. Here we can add time delays, how many days between sort of each workflow step. So when a subscription fails, what I can say is wait 2 days before I start taking action. If I don't do that, it says start retry policy, default retry policy up to 8 retries in 14 days. And I can basically adapt this and I can add a new one here. I changed it to 4 times in 1 month. We could do 8 times in 1 month as well. And then what happens after these 14 days and 8 retries have failed? Well, it's going to cancel the subscription. You can keep adding actions here, such as email a team member and mark the invoice as uncollectible. Okay, I'm not going to publish this. I'm just going to click back because in essence, we already have this configured, but it was just to show you the option that we can get more granular with these automations. So I remember when I missed a payment to Bubble and I got an email straight away, and that email had a link to update my card details because my card had expired. Click the button and off we go. So I feel like email communication is far more effective and easier to implement with Stripe than trying to build in a warning message on a user's account page, which you can do through the same logic that we've been using so far with webhooks to mark a payment as failed and then show a message. But I tend to use the Stripe way. I think it's a better way. Not everyone is logging into your software every day. Maybe they are, but most times they aren't. And I don't go to my Bubble account every day and I wouldn't know that a subscription has failed unless I had an email. So in terms of dunning and failed payments, this is the route we're going to use in this course. And it only requires us to toggle on a few options and configure the amount of retries over a given period. Okay, so that is the dunning section. I want us to just go back to the home option, because in order to continue with the rest of this course, we actually have to activate our account. There is an amazing feature that I want to be able to utilize for upgrading and downgrading plans, as well as card management, because card management is really tricky to build yourself. And I feel like Stripe do a fantastic job at this. The Stripe customer portal exists under settings, billing, and then customer portal. See, we've got test mode here. Now this is a Stripe hosted page, much like our checkout session. I want to use the Stripe hosted page for upgrading, downgrading, as well as updating card details like I just mentioned. In order to use this feature though, you need an activated account on Stripe. So it's a bit of a process you have to go through to prove that you are a human. It's a bit of a sensitive process because you do have to put in bank details, etc. If you're watching this course, if you've got this far, then you're probably building a SaaS product. You'll have to go through this anyway. Okay, so you can either choose not to activate your Stripe account and put in all of your personal details and just watch the next few parts of this course, or you can go through the process, activate your account, and that means you can follow along and then we can actually work through the customer portal, which is a fantastic no-code product by Stripe. Okay, so I'm going to go through now and activate my account, and I'll see you on the other side. Well, hopefully that was a successful activation. It took me about 2 minutes. I did have to give my real bank details that's just the way Stripe wants this to work. Okay, my Stripe account is activated. Let's jump in. So I've got this big check mark. Your account is now active. That lifts all the limits in place and allows me to continue building on. One of the things I want to build is Stripe Customer Portal. Now, before we look at the product, let's just review where we are with this overall build. So looking at subscription management, on the left, so far in Bubble, we've built the ability to create the subscription, update customer details, download invoices, and cancel a subscription. On the Stripe side, we've let Stripe deal with deleting a subscription to then send us a webhook at the end of the billing cycle and for us to then cancel a user's subscription on the Bubble side. We talked about dunning. We used the built-in options by Stripe to manage the dunning process. Stripe are far better at this process than we would be. Now we've got two more to do. So update card details, kind of a tricky one to deal with. So we're going to use Stripe Customer Portal for that purpose, as well as upgrading and downgrading a subscription, also fairly tricky. Stripe handle this really eloquently. Let's use their product for this purpose. Okay, so back in the Stripe dashboard, I'm going to type in Portal. That takes me straight to Customer Portal. Now we have a little button over here where I'm hovering. I've already clicked it. Basically says create the link, because that's all it is. It's a link. So I'm going to copy this link that I've just created. Please do the same. Now we need to go back to Bubble and add this link to the Manage Plan button on the account page. So I'm going to head to Account, jump into the Design tab, going to filter with Manage to look for the link, and here we go, Manage Plan. So once they click that link, they take it to Stripe Customer Portal. Now make sure, guys, in Stripe that you've toggled to be in test mode. Okay. So because we'll have two versions of this link, a live mode and a test mode, we're going to use this strategy isn't live mode to determine which link to use depending on if the user is in version test or a deployed Bubble application. I'm going to say format it as text, and then I'm going to paste this link in. You use formatted as yes for this test link. You'll see the word test. Once you're ready to go live in Stripe, you need to grab the new live link and paste that into this section here where it says no. Okay, that's all we need to do. So how this process works is Stripe actually uses magic link. So Stripe is going to email the user a link to click, and then that user just logs in with their email address. So let's make sure that we are logged in. Okay, we want to be logged in as Nathan. I'm currently logged in as Nathan, so I'm going to preview the account page. Give that a refresh. And let's see what happens when I click on Manage Plan. Okay, so I have to type in my email address. And now I need to go check my email and find the link. Okay, so I clicked the link and that logged me in to Customer Portal. So Nathan is logged into Customer Portal. And we have a few options here, but not all of the options I'm looking for. So first of all, let's have a look at payment method, because I've currently got a card here with the expiry date, okay? And I can add a new payment method. So here I can add a backup payment method. Now, if a card is expiring, Stripe deals with dunning. They will email the customer a link that brings them to Customer Portal to add a new card or update their card details, okay? So that's the card details dealt with in Customer Portal. Now we have to go back to the Stripe Customer Portal dashboard to configure which features we'd like to enable. And we don't want these features to overlap with what we've built. And what we've built is the ability for a customer to update their details, their personal details, to download invoices and for a customer to cancel their plan. Now it's better UX to only enable this in one part, so we don't want any overlap. What we want to now enable is for a customer to be able to update the card details. We've just looked at that, tick in the box, but more importantly, upgrade and downgrade. So we need to enable that. So we're back in the customer portal. On the right-hand side is a preview of what you've just seen when Nathan was logged in. Okay, so currently we can only cancel a plan and update card details. So you need to do this. I actually did this ahead of time. I was just testing some functionality. This is where we can toggle on and off the invoice history. We've already built this, so we don't want to repeat this. Turn it off. Customer information, turn that off as well. Payment methods, we do want this. Now this is pretty cool. I'm going to hit manage here to look at other acceptable payment methods. And this is why I love Customer Portal, because you actually cannot build this in Bubble. So businesses have seen a 27% increase in sales when they let customers pay in installments. That's interesting. Buy now, pay later. And that is available to us, guys. But if I scroll down, I can see country specific and demographic specific payment options and wallets such as Alipay, Apple Pay, Google Pay, PayPal. Massive. So PayPal button can appear in the checkout page or as an option for recurring payments as well in Stripe Customer Portal. You can turn these on the right-hand side. There's no configuration needed. And then all of these specific banking options such as options in Austria, Germany, Netherlands, buy now, pay later with ClearPay and Klarna, direct debits, all sorts. This is why I absolutely love this product. Okay, so we are allowing payment methods. Cancellations, we're handling this. I'm going to toggle this off because we are handling this in Bubble. We've built this workflow. Subscriptions, okay. Customers can switch plans. Yes, let's turn this on and let's choose the plans that they can change to. So we've got yearly plan, growth plan, starter plan. Okay, now I've got a toggle to say prorate subscription updates. We do need to do that. So we just need to think about this logically now. If a user is on a starter plan in the middle of the month, if they change to a growth plan, there's going to be a payment difference that they need to pay straight away to be able to update to the growth plan. Another reason why I love using Stripe Customer Portal, Stripe works this out for us. We just have to toggle it on. We've also got an option to allow promo codes. We're not covering that in this version of the course, but I suspect this will be included in future versions. And we've got other business information that we're not dealing with. Okay, I'm going to save changes. Don't forget, in the settings area, you can also add your logo. You can add your primary color and your accent color, so it looks very, very similar to your own brand. Okay, so I've refreshed the page. Now if I choose Update Plan, it's saying, great, Nathan, you're currently on the starter plan. Here we go. And that's all synced up with Bubble as well. Now, if I want to change to the growth plan, or I want to change to a yearly plan, well, we need to provision those changes in Bubble. Yes, Stripe, webhooks, sending data to our endpoint. Let's have a look at that. Okay, back in Bubble, I'm going to go to backend workflows, and we've already created one for subscription updated. Now, the subscription updated API endpoint actually handles a lot of things. Currently, we're using it for when a customer cancels a plan. Let's have a look. So when a customer cancels a plan, the customer.subscription.updated event is being sent to Bubble, and it's going to include data about when to cancel this plan, or the date that this has been canceled, so you can show it back to a user, and basically a yes or no if we should be canceling this at period end. But this particular endpoint we're also going to use to allow a user to change their plan. There is a bit of logic involved in this that we need to do because we're using this endpoint for multiple reasons. First thing we're going to do is create a custom event. We're going to call this custom event Update Plan. I'm going to change this color to purple. easier to identify. And we're going to add 3 parameters here. The first being the subscription. That is of type subscription, because if a user is changing their plan, well, we need to reflect that on the user's subscription with the new information. We're also going to send through ID price. That is just going to be text. And also ID invoice. That's going to be text. And the action we're going to run here is that when a user updates their plan, let's make changes to a thing. We're making changes to the subscription. And the plan that we're changing to is being sent by the ID price. That's how we're going to identify the plan, okay? We've done this a few times before. So to find which one of these plans a person is changing to, we have to say, get an option. First of all, get all of the plans, all options. Let's do a matching process here. So the user is changing to one of these plans, and we're going to identify that through the ID price. Is this plan's price test? Okay, obviously we're sending through the price test. I've already shown you how to use the dynamic path for test and live here. And then the first option or first item. So that deals with changing the plan on the subscription. So if they've moved from starter to growth or starter to the yearly plan, now that we've done that, now you can adapt their access. Okay, now they have access to more stuff or more volume or whatever it is that your SaaS app does. But we also need to capture a payment. Okay, a payment will be made because there is a difference between the plans. So we're going to create a new thing, create a new payment. We can add all fields, and we just have to get through these options here. So I'm currently sending through an invoice ID. So I'm just going to use that to pull the amount. So we're going to say get data from external API. We're going to use this particular get call, and we're just going to feed through ID invoice. Now we can tap into the amount paid and then divide it by 100. So this is the difference between the two plans that they need to pay immediately to upgrade their plan. We don't need billing reason for this. We're going to just copy this expression and then use it in these other fields. So paste expression. This is going to be the charge. The ID customer we can get from the subscriptions ID customer. ID invoice is coming from the parameter. The plan we can pull from the result of step 1. The subscription is coming from the parameter subscription. And I think we can get to the user from the subscriptions user. Perfect. So that's our custom event. So we only want this to run when an upgrade or downgrade is happening, not all the time. And to do that, to understand if a change of plan is happening, Stripe don't really make this easy for us, so we need to build our own logic. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the new plan coming down through the subscription updated endpoint, and I'm going to compare it to user's current plan. If it's different, then obviously there's a change being made, and we're going to trigger this custom event. So we need to go to subscription updated. And here I'm going to say custom events, trigger a custom event. We only have one, so Bubble has set this for us. We need to feed through these parameters. So we need to send a subscription to this custom event. Well, here we have a subscription in step 1, so we must be dealing with this subscription. So the result of step 1. So the ID price is the price coming through this webhook. So we need to use request data because this is new data coming down. I'm going to type plan and I'm going to get the plan ID. Fantastic. So that ID price is basically the starter, growth, or the yearly plan. Invoice is also going to be fresh. We need to grab that from the request data's invoice. We can use the latest invoice. Okay, now we don't want this to trigger all the time, because sometimes all we're doing, sometimes a user is not upgrading or downgrading, sometimes they are just canceling. So we need a condition here. So this is where I had to figure out my own logic to trigger this custom event. And what I'm doing is I'm saying that when the result of step 1's plans ID price test, okay, this subscription is attached to a plan, for instance, the starter plan. When the starter plan's ID is not the request data price ID or plan ID, that must mean that they are changing their plan, because this subscription exists. It has a fixed price ID over here, option sets. Here it is here. Now, if a user upgrades or downgrades, they're going to be sending down a new plan, and we need to then adapt a user's subscription to that plan. So that's what I'm using the trigger for. So if this is true, then we're going to run step 1 to make changes to the subscription, to then match what's on Stripe with Bubble, then also record the payment that was made, because there's going to be a difference in price, specifically for an upgrade. Okay, so we've already initialized this webhook. We've got our IP address for security. So we can go ahead and test this process without having to initialize. Okay guys, so here we are, still in Stripe Customer Portal, and I'm going to change to the growth plan. Okay, so we're jumping up by $30 from 20 to 50. I'm going to select this. I'm going to click continue. And this is what I love about Stripe, just giving as much detail as possible. So growth plan, what you'll pay monthly starting from 1 month's time is going to be $50. But amount due today is going to be $29.95. And this is when we toggle the pro rata toggle switch in the dashboard under Stripe Customer Portal. Stripe is now handling this process for us, okay? So subscribe and pay. Okay, so on Stripe, we have confirmation that it is now the growth plan for Nathan. Let's jump into the Stripe dashboard. And let's click on customers. Here we have Nathan Wright. Nathan Wright is now on the growth plan. And look at these payments. So the first payment was for $20, now it's $29.95. So Nathan used the starter plan just for a few hours and then immediately upgraded to the growth plan, and we've let Stripe handle the logic behind proration. If I scroll down, I can see recent activity, change subscription from this price to this price. So this was the clue that I used to define the logic in the backend workflows of when to trigger the custom event. I knew from this recent activity, from trial and error, that there would be a mismatch in the pricing plans because we're changing. And here we can see that an invoice was paid and lots of good data here. So now we need to jump to Bubble to make sure that the data is correct on the Bubble side. All right, so let's jump into the data, app data, and let's go down to users. Here is Nathan. We didn't actually check this data earlier, but it all looks good to me. Let's go to subscriptions. And here we go, guys. Nathan is now on the growth plan. I'm going to click on the pencil icon and let's review this data. So still active. Nathan decided not to cancel. He's now on the growth plan. Here is his subscription. We can search Stripe with that ID and so forth. What about the payment of $29.95? Here it is here, $29.95. It's in relation to this subscription. Okay, here's the invoice. That's the ID charge for this particular amount, and that was in terms of the growth plan. And in actual fact, we could have added a billing reason here, our own custom billing reason being an upgrade, subscription upgrade. Why don't we go ahead and do that? I'm just going to type that in here for a second. So this is our own custom one. This doesn't exist in Stripe, but it's nice for us to know what these payments are for. So I'm going to go back into the backend workflows, and this trigger was triggered. This custom event did run upgrade plan. We made a change to the subscription to growth, and we captured the payment amount of $29.95. I'm going to add in billing reason here. This will allow us to create logic and display reasons why certain payments are made. We can filter them by subscription that was created, it was part of a cycle, or it was upgraded. Okay, now let's deal with downgrades, because we have a starter plan and a growth plan. If a user is on a growth plan, they can then downgrade back to the starter plan. If they take out a yearly plan, well, they can't downgrade a yearly plan because you've already paid for that plan. Okay, so can't downgrade from a yearly, but you can upgrade to a yearly. There's a small change I want to make in our workflows before we get going with this. So let's just adjust that quickly. So in your backend workflows, please pop in there for a second. On our custom event for step 2, create a payment, I just want to change the subscription to, instead of upgrade, change this to update. Change this to update, okay? And then in the database, I'm also going to change this to update. I'm just following the Stripe documentation for this. Okay, great. I wanted to jump into the Stripe Customer Portal dashboard in Stripe to look at some of the options available to us. So we chose to prorate a subscription when it's updated, okay? And this makes sense to invoice someone immediately when they are upgrading. They want immediate access to the new plan in Bubble. So we have to charge them for that immediate access as well. We also have the option to issue invoice at the end of the billing period. When it comes to downgrade, that kind of makes more sense. Keep them on the growth plan. If they want to downgrade, well, they've already paid for the month, and you want to downgrade them at the end of the month. The only problem is that Stripe only offers us one or the other. They don't offer us to select invoice immediately for upgrading and invoice at the end of the billing period for downgrading. They just don't do that, so we have to select one. So I just wanted to point out the difference here, and that this invoice immediately is great for upgrades. This is better for downgrades, but we can't distinguish between the two, so we're just going to use invoice immediately. Now, let me take you to the Stripe documentation a second. Because if someone has paid for a growth plan and we immediately downgrade them, which we're going to have to do, we're going to have to immediately downgrade them through the middle of the month. But what will happen is that they will have credits applied to the next invoice. Okay, so even though we're downgrading them straight away, next month's invoice will be discounted because they didn't finish the full month on an upgraded plan, but they've already paid for that upgraded plan. But we need to downgrade them straight away, okay? So let's go to the backend workflows. Let's look at this workflow again. So the subscription updated is going to fire this one here. On step 1, we are going to look to see if there's any data around canceling, which there won't be. So we'll move on to step 2. Step 2 will only fire if there's discrepancy between a user's ID price test and the plan ID coming from Stripe. There will be. Much like on the upgrade, there was a discrepancy. Therefore, this custom event is going to fire. Okay, so in step 1, we're basically going to capture the new plan, which will be starter. It's currently growth, and now it's going to be starter. And in terms of creating a payment doesn't actually need to be made. Stripe is not going to charge them, but they will give them credits towards next month's payment. So what we need is a conditional statement over here to basically only run step 2 if a payment has been made. Otherwise, this will run and just create some useless data. So what we'll do, we'll use this one here. Copy this expression for the amount paid. I'm going to paste the expression and say that if the amount paid, it's going to delete 100 and delete divided by. If the amount paid, and I just need to make sure that it is a number. If the amount paid is greater than 0, that's when you run this step. If it is 0, do nothing. Okay, let's jump back into Stripe Customer Portal, logged in as Nathan. Okay, so let's change Nathan's plan. Update plan. We're at growth. We paid the full $50. And we're going to downgrade now and receive credits for next month. Let's continue. And here's some information for Nathan to read just to make sure. So going back to starter, what you'll pay monthly starting from next month, because it's currently the 3rd of July for me, will be $20. Amount due today, nothing. Subscribe. Okay, let's have a look. Update plan. Currently on the starter, fantastic. Let's head to the Stripe dashboard next. Heading to subscriptions. And here we can see that Nathan is now on the starter plan. Let's head into Bubble. And let's go check out the data. I'm going to refresh. We can see that no payments have been made, okay, after refreshing. Fantastic. Go to subscriptions, and we can now see that Nathan is on the starter plan. But no further payments were made. Okay guys, big exhale. That was a lot to take in. Subscription lifecycle, handling dunning, failed payments, successful payments, provisioning through webhooks. That's a lot of information. But this is a really, really solid integration. It's secure with Stripe IPs. So congrats for getting this far. There are a few more things we need to tidy up and talk about. So let's just underscore that, and then you've completed the course. So one of the things I wanted to make sure that we did was on the backend workflows, make sure that you have allowed IPs contains request data's connecting IP, okay? Securing with IP addresses on all of them. Obviously not an update plan because that is a custom event, it's internal. Wanted you to make sure that also under data privacy, that you have privacy rules applied for all of these guys. Otherwise, some of your data might be public. And also in the settings area, make sure that currently I have everyone can view, but make sure you're set to a private app, okay? A private app. Otherwise, users can gain access to your editor, and therefore they can gain access to both your test and your live databases. I'm going to leave this open, everyone can view, so that you can jump in and take a look around and fix any problems that you potentially have. Okay guys, so hopefully you are now comfortable in communicating with Stripe. There's a lot more we can do. We've just done the basics, but we've done the main subscription management, the main life cycle of a SaaS app. We have configured that nice and securely. Please leave me some feedback in the comment section. Let me know how you got on, how far you got. Hopefully you did manage to finish and you have successfully implemented this into your own app. And also stick around with the channel. Make sure to like and subscribe. This basically enables me directly to be able to create more content for you. And I've got a big content plan, but That content plan will only be executed if this channel grows. So please do me a favor, it just takes 1 second to do that, and I will see you in the next course.